2 Saturdays left in the regular season, and this weekend CAA football presented by Geico is here to take you down the home stretch. You know the deal by now. He's Tim McDonald. I'm Bobby Broyles. Obviously, the biggest story from the weekend was Richmond picking up its first conference loss. And now, like always at this time of year, Tim, the conference title race only gets tighter.
Things just keep getting better. You know, you look at that UNH game. Credit to the Wildcats D. Pick off Kyle Aletta 4 times. Just really forced Richmond to look one-dimensional at times. Don't get me wrong, Jacoby Green still had a heck of a game, and the Richmond offense still moved the ball, but New Hampshire, a huge win. How about this? 11 straight CAA home wins for New Hampshire. 7 first-half points for Richmond was the lowest this season. Both New Hampshire and Richmond had 468 yards of offense, but again, UNH had more plays and more time of possession, something that we didn't think was possible. Towson, not the prettiest win, but they got it done. That's all that matters. 10-7 win at Maine. Like we said, not the prettiest win. Both teams had under 300 yards of offense, but if you're Towson at this point, you just got to keep on moving.
Yes.
Villanova also kept, if we're talking playoffs, also kept its playoff hopes alive. A big win at Rhode, 24-3, 284 rush yards. That was a season high. Also picked off Rhode 4 times. Albany, also a little bit of an eye-opener. A nice win for Albany. A huge win at Delaware, 17-6. Held Delaware to 224 yards of total offense. Also, Stony Brook, of course, we got to talk about the Seawolves getting back in the winning column, snapping a 5-game losing streak with a win over Howard. But Bob, this week, the matchups just keep getting bigger and bigger, and we're going to find out who's the real deal down the stretch.
And of course, Richmond's loss and William & Mary's win is really
setting it up for the final game of the season.
Exactly. It could set up for the final game of the season, but we won't get ahead of ourselves yet. Half the league has 5 wins or more at this point, but things will work their way out because a lot of those top-tier teams play each other these next 2 weeks, like we said. Before, like we said, again, getting ahead of ourselves, let's start with Week 11 in Newark at 3:30 on Comcast Sportsnet and CA.TV as the JMU Dukes come off a much-needed bye week to take on the Blue Hens.
By the time this game takes place on Saturday, it's almost going to be a month since JMU won its last game, which is really interesting to think about. JMU's last win came at Elon on October 17th. Since then, 2 straight losses, but again, it's not like they've lost. It's not like they've been bad losses. It's been good losses, if you can call it a good loss. Richmond and William & Mary in back-to-back weeks. Of course, the bye week couldn't have come at a better time if you want to talk about a team trying to regain what it had early on in the season. We've seen Shore at quarterback. He had a good game, 17 of 27, 1 interception, 1 touchdown at William & Mary. It was just a shootout loss. I'm really interested to see James Madison's rushing attack because that was the story for this team coming into the first half of the season. Cardin Johnson and Khalid Abdullah both ranked 4th and 5th in CAA football, 96 and 89 yards per game. But we know how good Delaware's defense has been. The Blue Hens lost last week, only scored 6 points, 2 field goals from Frank Ragu. But again, you look at Delaware's defense, and that really, on paper, hasn't been the issue. The rush D for Delaware is 4th in CAA football, 123.9 yards per game. A CAA low, 6 touchdowns allowed. I think that's going to be the key. It's going to be JMU's offense versus that Delaware defense. If JMU's offense and Shore can get the ball out to the playmakers and really force James Madison, to use all the weapons that they have, I think that's going to be key. If Delaware's defense can show up and stop the run, then JMU could be in trouble. But again, Delaware right now, offensively, passing-wise, I don't think they have enough capable weapons and enough capable arms to get it done past JMU.
At 7 on the American Sports Network and CA.TV, New Hampshire looking to build off that huge win over Richmond. Now they travel to Albany to take on the Great Danes. The Wildcats, for now, have put themselves back into the playoff conversation.
They have, slowly and surely. New Hampshire, ever since that second half of the Rhode game, the offense started clicking, and you saw that last week at Richmond. 9 different players caught a pass last week. Sean Goldrich, Offensive Player of the Week, 2 touchdowns. New Hampshire did not turn the ball over. Like we said, more plays than Richmond and better time of possession than Richmond. I think that was key. Obviously, playing at home helped. But where's New Hampshire going right now, Bob? On the road, where they have not played well this season at all. 1-4 on the road. You can't afford to look over Albany, especially after what the Danes did last week. Like I said, only allowed 224 yards of total offense, 103 passing yards. So again, this is a really interesting matchup. Albany's running back, Abedikin Hanks, had 202 yards the week previous. Last week, he had 135 yards. How about this? DJ Crook, too, last week at Delaware, comes off the bench, had a huge run, 60-plus yard run in the fourth quarter to spark the win. Albany fought and battled at Delaware, a place that's really hard to win, as we've seen a couple of teams in CAA football. Learned that on a first-hand basis. New Hampshire last week, without Dalton Crossan, gets it done. I think the key for New Hampshire is to keep that offensive consistency that we've seen, especially the last game and a half. We've seen it through New Hampshire's offense, and I think that's the turning point. Don't forget, they play Maine at home the following week. If you can finish at 7-4, still in the playoff conversation for sure, but you can't look Albany on the road.
Absolutely. Earlier in the day at 1:30, Williamsburg is home to another key game this season when the number 7 Tribe takes on Towson. The Tigers have won 4 straight, and William & Mary has won 5 in a row.
An interesting point. Williamsburg is just becoming the mecca right now
yes,
in CAA football for huge games. We've seen and William & Mary has answered the call every time they've played at home this season, undefeated. William & Mary right now, if you look at that Richmond loss last week, they're both controlling their own fate, if you want to call it that.
Yeah.
Of course, if you get past Towson this week, that's when you can start talking about that game. But still, William & Mary gets it done on the road last week. 4 turnovers at Elon, 73 rush yards for Elon. Just defensively, they're just looking better and better each week. And again, Luke Rhodes, we saw him kind of look like the old Luke Rhodes of the past. He came back, looked very healthy. Zach Fetters also played very well. How about this? 13-game streak of over 100 rush yards for a running back from William & Mary was snapped. Thanks a lot, Anderson and Abdul Sabor. But still, get it done. 12 carries each and 1 touchdown each. Again, William & Mary's offense has been dictated all season long by its run game. I think that's going to be huge this week. But here comes Towson. Like we said, Bob, riding this one on a winning streak. I know the offense hasn't really been the story. It's been the defense.
Yeah.
Look at Towson's D. Last week at Maine, 7 points allowed. That came in the second half late. 4th in scoring defense, 20.4 points per game. 3rd in rush defense, 3rd in pass defense, and 3rd in total defense. I think William & Mary is going to enter this game trying to obviously set the tone on the ground, and Towson is going to try to stack the box. Vice versa, I think if you're William & Mary's defense, you got to make Towson try to beat you through the air with Connor Frazier, because I think Towson's run game we know is their strength. Offensively, Towson needs to be able to keep up in this game if they want to have any shot. William & Mary plays so well at home. I think the tempo of this game is going to be a huge factor. And Bob, I love kickers.
Oh, yes,
I got to bring up the kickers
do.
in this. I think it's going to be a huge part of this game. Nick Dorka, 14 of 18 on the season. Sam Hurwitz, 9 of 11. Of course, Hunter Widmiller, CAA football leader in punting, 44.1 yards per punt, and Jake Ryder of Towson, 42.6. Field position and special teams, as always, is going to be a huge part of this game.
Like you always say, kickers and punters are people too, Tim.
Don't forget about those guys.
Don't ever forget about them. All of a sudden in Philly, things get interesting with another critical matchup that has postseason implications when Villanova hosts Richmond at 3:30.
When teams have senior games, oftentimes I think that's an overblown and an overlooked statement, but I don't know. This is a really interesting matchup. All of a sudden, you have Nova at 5-4. They're probably not going to go down quietly.
No.
Still technically in the playoff hunt, if you want to call it that. And here comes Richmond. Off a tough loss at New Hampshire, has to go back on the road. Villanova last year, let's not forget, lost that game at Richmond. It was 10-9. It was a really interesting game.
Yeah.
I think they still remember that one.
Bad weather.
I'm just licking my chops for this one. This is a really good game just because you look at Villanova's defense. 3 of the last 4 opponents have not scored a touchdown versus Villanova. That one loss was the Towson loss. Matt Gudzik last week had a career-high 118 yards rushing and a touchdown. And Bednarczyk, each week, Bob, we see him improve and just look a little bit more comfortable, a little bit more understanding, a little bit more of a better clue of what he's doing on offense. 11 of 18 passing last week for a touchdown, also had 74 rush yards. Villanova's rushing offense, like we mentioned, 284 yards. I think that's going to be key. If they can get anything done versus Richmond, that's going to be huge. I would really, really want to see how Richmond responds. Yeah. Your first loss since opening week. Kyle Lauletta, we know he threw some picks. We know Seth Fisher didn't play. I said again, Jacoby Green, he's still going to get his numbers.
Yes,
he's still going to. They're still going to try to attack the run game. I really want to see how Richmond can respond. Like I said, 7 points at halftime. That was just shocking to see last week. And again, that halftime deficit of 14 points at New Hampshire was the highest for Richmond all season long. This, for me, is the game of the week in CAA football because of the implications for both teams. Villanova, nothing to lose here. Richmond, again, like we said, keep looming ahead. If you keep looking ahead at that William & Mary game, only things can get better.
And like you mentioned at the beginning, the power of senior day, Villanova's going to have some inspiration. John Robertson, especially when you see him out there, and Don Cherry, those guys are going to be bringing it on this Saturday. At 12:30 on Fox College Sports, Elon heads to Maine. 2 teams that both lost disappointingly last week, Tim.
Yeah, and you say disappointingly, you look at that Elon contest, it's a tough loss. William & Mary comes to town, and 34-13, it just really physically, that was the difference in that game. Coach Grossi said it best. He didn't think his team came out with as much energy, maybe as much focus as they probably should have against a William & Mary team. Early on in that contest, Elon fell behind 21-0. Obviously, a quick hole against a William & Mary team is just very hard to get. Elon actually did outgain William & Mary. I know that's, stats are sometimes what you try to hang your hat on that, but Connor Christensen did pass for 318 yards. That was a career high. How about that was the first 300-yard passing game for an Elon quarterback in 18 games. So that just proves to show you, Elon, I know they lost, and I know statistically you can't really look at that and say that was the difference in the game, but you still have to grab a little bit of momentum with that. Maine has lost 3 of 4 games coming into this one. Again, the last time Maine has struggled this much on offense, we've seen the defense all year. It has pretty much been there, but offensively it's just been a struggle. You look at the last losses that they've had 21 points over their last 3 games. You just got to keep progressing. I know it stinks to only score 7 points and lose, but you were really in that game last week, all game versus Towson. 15.1 points per game for Maine, 12.2 points for Elon. I think it could be a low-scoring game, but I could also see it being let the floodgates open wide open. People make a big deal, too, of Elon having to go to Orono this late in the season. I don't think that's a huge deal. I think either way, both of these teams want to finish the season strong.
Speaking of 2 teams that want to finish the season strong, let's finish Week 11 with a 12:30 game featuring Stony Brook and Rhode Island in Kingston.
5-game losing streak snap for Stony Brook, and Donald Leontine gets it done. A redshirt freshman running back who's a walk-on. What does he do, Bob? Career-high 38 carries, 204 yards, and 2 touchdowns versus Howard. Again, not the prettiest win, but Stony Brook gets it done 14-9 over Howard. Stony Brook's defense was the numbers were just video game-like. Minus 42 rush yards, 109 total yards of offense for Howard. Victor Ochi, hats off to him. He's now tied for the all-time lead in Stony Brook program history with sacks and tackles for loss. He had 3 each last week. Coming into this one, I know if you're Rhode, I know it struggled last week to get anything going. It was only 7-3 at halftime if you're watching that game versus Villanova. Still in that contest, but, 4 picks is going to doom you anytime you do that. We saw Wesley McKee play. We saw James Caparelli play. So, again, I think offensively, Rhode is still trying to find some answers. But right now, if you're Stony Brook and the players, I know Chuck Priori said in his postgame how happy he was just for the program and the players to get back in the winning streak. I think Stony Brook's run game is going to dictate the flow of this game, and I think that's going to be the difference.
Tim, if you want to know where to watch games this week, cafootball.com has all the links you need, including live stats for all you stat geeks out there. CA.TV will have a live simulcast of CSN's broadcast with Delaware and JMU. And then later on Saturday night, we'll also have the ASN simulcast of Albany and UNH.
So, I got to get my social media soapbox out here.
Go.
CA Football is on Twitter at CA Football, on Facebook at facebook.com/CA Football. You can find us on Instagram and Snapchat as well by searching CA Football. Of course, if you ever have any questions or want to interact with us, you can use our official hashtag CAAFB.
CA Football's on-campus crew returns this weekend as you, Mike, and Eric head to Delaware for this Saturday's contest between the Dukes and the Blue Hens. I'll miss you guys, by the way.
Yeah, don't cry.
So visit CA Football's Everyday is Saturday blog at cafootball.wordpress.com for coverage from Delaware, and tune in next week for the season finale of our Going Deep features. Same place, same time next week, but until then, enjoy the game Saturday.